You can be one of two things in this life, Hobbs used to say to me. You can be quick, or you can be dead. That advice had stood him in good stead. His powers of evasion were legendary. He'd managed to elude just about every authority there was in the Outlands, and he had bounties on his head from Crimson Pyre to the Delphian Nexus. He'd passed that wisdom on to me, and together we had made a pretty decent living out here, breaking and taking, stuffing our holds with all we could carry before boosting to the next sector to do it all over again. It had served us well, all told, but now I had to make a choice of my own. As I hear the sirens approaching, I check my escape route through the complex on the scanner. I look down at Hobbs as he lays dead on the floor, a slug from my pistol on his back. You can be one of two things in this life, he used to say to me. You can be quick, or you can be dead. Thanks for the advice, old man. Play podcast in which I, Matt Risby, and I alone am playing through Ironsworn Starforged. I hope you enjoyed this week's Tale from the Drift. That was actually one of mine again this week because I've got a backlog to get through, to be honest. But submissions are still open as always, so if you want to roll on some oracles and see what you can come up with, then please do get in touch via the details that are on the screen now. One other piece of housekeeping before we begin, and that's that I will be taking a couple of weeks off for a mid-season break in August, but please don't panic. I have some other non-campaign Starforge related content to go up and fill the void, and also to appease the YouTube algorithm. And I have things like an extended how to play guide for beginners. I also have top tips for solo play, and hopefully some interviews too, fingers crossed. But I want you to let me know in the comments below if there's any other content you'd like to see. Just, shoot some ideas out, and, if they take my fancy, I will get right to it. But in the meantime, we move on to Session 11. And Archer, Griff, and Luna continue their journey across the Outlands in search of the mysterious navigator/wanted criminal Blake Sutton. Having left the industrial moon of Rust and its labour dispute behind, they now find themselves in the orbit of a grave world with a shattered moon. Not only that, they have discovered what appears to be a derelict spaceship belonging to the Griffin Institute, the organisation to which Archer used to belong, the organisation that covered up Professor Darwin's disappearance, the organisation that may or may not be chasing Archer through the Forge. If you want to stay abreast of the action every week, then please leave a like, subscribe, and click the bell to be notified whenever I drop a new video. If you do that, not only will you not miss a thing, I will love you forever, and that is a guarantee. So, where were we? Let's start by envisioning this derelict spaceship. Now, we previously established that anything that belongs to the Griffin Institute has this kind of utilitarian, functional look to it. The Eclipse, the ship that we're on now, is this boxy, kind of unshowy exploration craft. And Griff, our unreliable little survey bot, is basically just an oversized toaster with scanners and some caterpillar tracks. Nothing is sleek, nothing is smooth. It's all function coming before form. So, with that in mind, let's say that this is a very large craft. Let's say it's kind of 80 or 90 meters long. It's rectangular and blocky with 4, let's say, powerful engines at the stern. And I think Archer's probably been on one of these ships in the past, or at least something that's very similar to this ship. And yeah, I'd say the main body of the ship is labs and research stations. That is what this is for. That is what you will find at the center of this ship. There'll be archives and crew quarters, but it's essentially a flying university science faculty. Let's say on either side of the ship, running kind of the entire length are observation windows, kind of up both sides. And this isn't a ship that's built for combat or evasion. There's no weaponry. There's no protection. So yeah, it's observational, research, exploration. The bow of the ship is where you'd find the bridge, and much like the Eclipse, it's kind of large, round, and there's a lot of glass, which kind of affords the crew the best possible view of whatever it is they're observing, I guess. And I also think that this ship would launch other smaller ships. I think there is a hangar bay somewhere inside, probably on the kind of the underside, where they can launch other vehicles. And I think this vessel in front of us is easily big enough to support 2 or 3 like ships the size of the Eclipse. Plus, there will probably be other support vehicles, kind of rovers and buggies and smaller support craft, maybe kind of like runabouts, that kind of thing. And the ship is the same kind of bronzed orange that Griff and the Eclipse are. So yeah, we're gonna use the Derelict's oracles to roll up a bit more detail and fill in some gaps. So firstly, we're going to establish what condition this derelict is in at first look. 38 is cold and dark. So I guess even though there is like so much glass with the viewing platforms and the large glass bridge and everything, it's totally dark inside. And even as we fly relatively close, we can't see anything going on. The engines clearly haven't been fired in a long time, and the entire ship has this kind of thin layer of icy frost covering it. It has clearly been out here for a long, long time. So Archer steers the Eclipse around the vessel kind of slowly, taking his time to gather as much kind of intel as he can. It certainly looks that way. Don't worry, I will. And I think maybe we've completed a preliminary survey, and now Archer moves the Eclipse kind of around to the underside to try and dock. And I think that's where we will find the hangar. So that hangar kind of would have housed other smaller ships and ships like the Eclipse. And as we do this, I think what we're going to do is we're going to roll and establish the final few details of what we find in the hangar before we explore this thing. So, what is the hangar like? 9 is archaic equipment. Okay, that's interesting. So, okay, let's say that the Eclipse has done 2 or 3 kind of passes of this larger vessel, and there's not much information to be gleaned. So Archer brings it around the underside where he knows there'll be a hangar bay. And it's dark. It doesn't seem to have any power, and the doors are kind of hanging open, exposed to the vacuum of space. And the thing that strikes Archer immediately as the Eclipse's searchlights illuminate the hangar is that this ship is old, like real old. Like the equipment and the layout, and maybe there's even like one ship left, like a small buggy or something, maybe a rover that would have been used for kind of planet side exploration. They're all kind of much, much older versions of what he's ever encountered. And yeah, kind of technology hasn't really advanced much in the Forge, and when it does it slowly. But this stuff is like ancient, and I think maybe Archer and the Professor probably spent a long time kind of complaining about how underfunded the Institute was and how they wish they had better equipment. But this is like something else entirely. This ship has clearly been here a long, long time. So the Eclipse touches down, and its searchlights kind of catch the glistening, icy frost that coats everything, and it's so still and quiet, kind of deathly quiet. And after one last look, Archer gets out of the pilot seat and moves into the cabin to kind of gear up. And before he does, he says to Luna, "Stay here and hail me if you see anything. Anything, understand?" "No way, I'm coming with you." You'll slow me down. We'll cover twice as much ground with two of us. Look, kid. I'm not a kid. Stop calling me that. Look. No. You look. We can either go together now, or you can leave me here and I'll just follow you. So let's just cut the debate and accept the inevitable. I'm no use to you, sat here twiddling my thumbs. And I think Archer is kind of taken aback by this. He feels kind of responsible for her by virtue of like just being older than her, I think. But she's tough and she can handle herself, and she can handle herself like much better physically than Archer, no doubt at all. So he concedes and says, fine. And Luna just has this beaming smile, which Archer already has seen enough of. And he moves across the cabin and he opens this cupboard, and it's up on the wall inside. He kind of looks and he sees a respirator and a tank and some goggles hanging there, and he kind of pauses briefly before he takes it off the hook. It was the professor's, but he takes it down and hands it to Luna. You'll need this. Grab some layers, it's going to be cold. And the two of them, along with Griff, stand in the hold, kitted out and ready to explore. Archer looks at Luna with these kind of like mismatched items of clothing and equipment, giving her this kind of really like unprepared look. And he presses the button and the ramp of the Eclipse descends. He turns to Luna and says, stay close. Don't touch anything. She nods back and they walk down the ramp. Griff kind of trundles a few meters ahead, and his crooked little antenna pops out and starts to spin slowly, scanning the way ahead. As they step off the ramp, their footsteps crunch the ice underfoot, and they kind of look around. The ice is completely undisturbed in this area anyway. There's machinery all around. There's kind of refueling stations, there's consoles, and they're all much bigger and boxier than anything Archer has seen or used before. And I think if we want to put it in real world terms, I guess it would be like getting into a car from like the 30s or 40s. There is clearly advanced technology for its time, and in the grand scheme of things. And the parts function in much the same way as they do now, but it's all bigger, kind of slower, less efficient, and yeah, old. So what we're going to do before we start to explore this derelict is we are going to theme the location. Now, the last time we themed a location, we found ourselves fighting through a radioactive infested jungle. So you may ask why I'm doing this. It's to add some flavour and excitement. Come on. We're not just going to kind of wander around this empty ship and kind of hopefully find some stuff. Let's make it interesting. So we're going to be exploring this derelict. What kind of derelict is it? 77 is ruined. Ruined. So ruined on the themes oracle says, time, disaster, or war have ravaged this place. Okay. This kind of checks out with everything we've seen so far, because we're in the orbit of this kind of grave world and with a shattered moon. So maybe this ship was surveying an actual world. Maybe this world used to be kind of vibrant and maybe full of life. And at some point that changed, and now we're in this entirely dead and lifeless place. So we're going to explore this derelict, and we'll do so by undertaking an expedition. And we're going to use the derelict oracles to guide us and kind of use it to help suggest what kind of things we're going to find. So let's name the expedition. It will be Explore the Griffin Institute Derelict. Let's call it that. And we'll give it a rank, and I'm going to say troublesome. It's the easiest one. We are actually still in the middle of an expedition. So we're here purely, I think, to resupply. Our supply's low, and I think Archer's curiosity needs to be satisfied about what this ship is here and what it's doing. But principally, we're out to get supplies. And this ship isn't anywhere near as big as the Creation. The last ship we explored, that was pretty big. This is kind of less than half the size of that. And there are two of us. I think it's fair to give it a troublesome rank. So let's begin. Griff is going to scan ahead for us, which is going to give us +1 thanks to our survey bot asset. And we're going to proceed with caution, rolling, plus wits. Good start, a strong hit. So we reach waypoint, we're going to envision it and mark progress. So up to 3 out of 10 on our progress. And let's say we cross the hangar slowly and cautiously. Archer's ahead. He has his staff, the multi-purpose space poker that can do all manner of things in his hands. And he unscrews it from the middle and he separates it into 2. And he flicks a switch and a beam of light shines from inside. And he tosses the other half to Luna, who does the same. And they kind of like scan around and the shafts of light cut through this darkened hangar and kind of picks out the edges of this long undisturbed equipment, and there doesn't seem to be any signs of distress or struggle here. It's like everything just stopped, disappeared. And as they cross the room, they reach a heavy door. There's no obvious power, there's nothing on, there's no lights or anything. So Archer kind of pops this small panel to the side of the door marked manual override and starts kind of pumping a lever that slowly edges the doors apart. Luna peers in, shares a nervous look with Archer. He looks in too, and then Griff fires up his lamp. And Archer turns to Luna and says, "Get in, get out, stay alive." She says, "I think I can remember that." And they step through the door into engineering. They step into a short corridor. It's completely dark. Everything is as it should be. There's no signs of damage, just more frost. At the end of the corridor, they reach another heavy door, and it's held by one of those doors, with the spinny handles like you'd find on a ship. And the two of them start to turn it. The cold and the years have conspired to kind of seal it fairly tightly shut. But after a moment and some real kind of effort, it gives, and the handle slowly turns. With a hiss, the door opens, and they step into what appears to be an engineering area, which is more specifically 70, water processing. So, it's this low-ceilinged room with various kind of vats and tanks cluttering up the inside, and I think this is both the water processing facility for the ship that provides water for the crew and stuff, but I think it's also maybe a testing station for water samples that have been brought onto the ship, maybe. And all the tanks are frozen over. All the vats and the connecting pipes are rigid with ice, and to scan the room with their flashlights, and there's nothing. There's just no power. It's still, it's eerie, it's quiet and lifeless. But there's an obvious way across the room, and they cross quickly and quietly with Griff trundling slowly behind them. The room has 2 exits, heading off in different directions. Let's see what each exit is. Okay, 65 is a lift or elevator. 20 is a corridor. So I think with the power out, the elevator is kind of out of the question. So we're going to be taking the corridor, kind of flashing our lights inside, and we can't see that far. So let's continue our expedition. And once again, we'll proceed slowly and carefully, rolling plus wits. That is a weak hit. So we reach a waypoint, but either suffer costs or encounter a peril. First, we'll mark the progress. So that's another 3 progress. Explore the Griffin Institute Derelict. So up to 6. I think that given the principal aim of this exploration is to resupply, we don't want to suffer any costs. So let's face a peril and see what we encounter. 76 is unstable or broken path. Okay. So let's say that this corridor is actually a suspended walkway. We can set foot on it, but it's kind of clearly unstable. And we kind of flash our lights out over the sides, and we can't see down very clearly, but it must go down a long way. And as we kind of inch along, we can kind of see that the middle section of the walkway is completely collapsed. And it leaves a 2 to 3 meter gap in the middle. This is our first sight of anything out of place. And it feels a bit to Archer like the atmosphere has kind of changed somewhat. He can feel this kind of sense of dread kind of creeping up on him as they've been working their way into the ship's interior. That might just be his own paranoia and worry, but he's definitely feeling it. So we're going to need to get across, and we don't have really any kit with us, so it's going to probably be a case of just having to jump across it. But I think what Archer will do is I think he will check to see if he's got anything that can help us in this situation. And I'm thinking specifically like something like a length of cable or actually maybe, okay, maybe he's going to see if Griff has some kind of like winch cable type thing built into his kind of inner shell. So yeah, Archer kneels down next to Griff and he kind of pops open this little hatch on his side and he's kind of rooting around in there looking for something and maybe it's something that he's maybe used a long time ago and he's kind of not sure if it's still in there, but yeah, it might be. So what I'm going to do is we're going to check our gear, and because of my upgraded scavenger asset, I can roll plus wits rather than supply, which is good because supply is pretty low. So let's roll that up. A weak hit, so I have it, but it either diminishes my supply or it's not quite right. Now again, this is a resupply mission, so it's going to have to cost us in terms of a complication or delay, because I don't think we can afford to give up any more resources. So I think that what this has done is the time it's taken for Archer to find it has kind of completely stopped us in our tracks, and he's there trying to dig around and find this cable, and kind of Luna's getting impatient, and she's just saying and kind of pointing at the gap and saying, come on, we can make that. But it's kind of not helping Archer. He's kind of continuing to struggle to look for it, and he's kind of getting more and more frustrated. But he finds it and kind of unspools it. And I think because this took a fair bit of time and slowed us down, I think we're going to lose 2 momentum. But our scavenger asset gives us a bonus momentum right back. So it went down to 2, but now it's back up to 3. So Archer takes this spool of cable and secures one end to the walkway on this side, kind of tying it in place. And then he kind of motions for Griff to cross the gap. And Archer just kind of starts nudging him towards the gap until his kind of little boosters sputter to life, and he kind of lifts into the air with a great amount of effort, it must be said. And he kind of moves the short distance across the gap and touches down on the other side, and he kind of keeps moving until the cable goes taut. And I think that the weak hit means that this cable just wasn't quite the right thing, and that we can't really use it to swing across or climb across or anything, or, kind of secure it to ourselves to stop us falling. But it will at least kind of hold the walkway in place, I think, a little better, or make it a bit more sturdy. And Griff kind of comes to this part of the walkway that's kind of sticking up and jutting through the floor, and I think he circles it, and that kind of ties the cable or holds the cable in place. And Archer can feel the floor below him become kind of slightly more steady, and with that, he's now happy to try and jump across. So he takes this moment, kind of steels himself, prepares, kind of works out how much of a run-up he'll need, and kind of gives himself the space. And as he's doing that, he's kind of psyching himself up to make the jump. Luna just goes, she just bounds up to the gap and launches herself across and clears it with ease. She kind of tumbles forward on the other side and rolls back to her feet. This kind of incredibly graceful motion. Kind of looks across to Archer and kind of raises her hands, kind of beckoning him across. And it's his turn. So he backs up and he starts to run. And he runs, he gets to the gap, and he launches himself. And for this, we're going to face danger. And it'll be using our agility, so rolling plus edge. A miss with a match. Oh dear, oh dear. Wonderful. So, Archer is sailing through the air. And as he kind of hits the peak of his jump, he realizes that he is nowhere near as nimble or as fast as Luna, and he has totally misjudged this. And it all kind of goes into slow motion, and he can see Luna grabbing her mouth over her respirator, and she's in shock at the kind of sheer misjudgment of this jump. And Archer just flings his hands out. He's not going to make it, but he's kind of reaching and reaching for something as he kind of starts to feel himself fall. And if he doesn't find anything to clasp onto, he'll be plummeting down into this darkness. And I think he kind of flails his arms, and he snags his armpit onto the cable that's been pulled taut. But he's kind of a good meter away from safety. He kind of just about made it halfway across this gap, and his weight kind of jerks Griff forward, and the piece of walkway the cable was tied around starts to creak and groan, and Luna has to kind of drop down and grab the cable, and she wedges her feet against the handrail to support herself, and she struggles with the effort and the strain, and takes all her might to kind of keep the cable in her grasp. She has Griff kind of wedged against her back, and practically all of Archer's weight is now passing through the cable and through her hands and her legs, and she strains, but with this huge effort, she manages to straighten her legs and brace herself in place, giving Archer the best possible chance to clamber across. So we have to pay the price for this miss with a match, but what price shall we pay? Well, I think because of the match on that miss, what I'm going to do is I'm going to roll not one, but two separate perils. Firstly, I'm going to roll on the theme peril, and then I'm going to roll on the location peril, because we're still in a corridor. We haven't even made it to the next part of the expedition. So, theme-wise, okay, 16. Evidence of a horrible fate for others who pass this way. And 55. Gear is failing or broken. Okay, so. Okay, Archer steadies himself on the cable, thanks in no small part to Luna's efforts, and he's able to kind of reach out and stretch and grip onto the other side of the walkway, and he kind of lets go of the cable and he swings across. His body is dangling down. His flashlight made it across the gap, and maybe it's kind of like pointing down. It's kind of stuck between the kind of the slats of the metal walkway, and it's kind of illuminating everything below him as he hangs there, as the light is kind of shining through this grating of the walkway. And he makes the mistake of looking down. And I think as his eyes have adjusted to the darkness, and with the kind of slightly better, more direct light coming from above, he can see that whatever broke this walkway has also smashed through several floors below. The void below him goes down much further than he thought, stretching way beyond where he can see. And as he hangs there, looking down, he notices something else. He kind of catches sight of something below him. And I think it's a body. But it's hanging from a support rope tied at the waist. It's a cable, kind of a rope or a cable, much like the one that's just saved his life. And he kind of quickly motions to Luna to shine her light down. And she does. And we can see there's more bodies. They're all hanging motionless. I mean, it's hard to pick out any kind of identifiable details because they're all wearing kind of heavy gear and helmets. But there's, let's say, 4 bodies hanging at the end of guide ropes. And they had all met their end by either trying to climb out or climb down. And yeah. Now Luna pulls Archer up and he kind of joins her looking down at this macabre scene. And I think we rolled the gear is failing or broken peril. So I think that's the point at which their flashlights go out. That's the gear that has failed or broken. So they're now relying on Griff for their only source of light. Yes, that is how bad things are. They are relying solely on Griff. Okay, so and we haven't even envisioned our waypoint yet. That was just the corridor linking it. So Luna pulls Archer to his feet and releases the cable from Griff, who kind of wheels around in a circle, relieved to be free of it. So what's at the end of this corridor? Let's find out. Okay, 88 is production. And more specifically, 51 is monitoring or control room. Okay, so what unique feature could this area have? 41 is ill-fated workers. Okay, so it's getting a bit more gnarly as we move through the ship, so Archer, I think, was right to kind of feel the bad vibes coming. So, okay, we move through an open door that's at the end of this corridor and into a circular room. Once again, it's low-ceilinged and cramped, and there are banks and banks of monitors running in semicircles around the room, all facing a large screen that's on the far wall. This looks to Archer very much like a mission control type space where kind of various engineers would be able to monitor the ships as they went down to the surface, or kind of be able to receive kind of messages back and see what they were seeing. And yeah, kind of as they were down there on their fact-finding missions, this is where all the information was being back up. But the screens are all blank. The room, which probably would have been like a kind of a buzzing hive of excitement, is now just deathly quiet. And at each monitor, at each console, a body is slumped over, face down, and still. There are 12 consoles, and there are 12 bodies. Luna is kind of moving ahead through the dark, walking slowly, carefully between the desks. She stops at one desk in particular and leans in to get a closer look. Don't touch anything. Why are we whispering? Everyone is dead. Just don't touch anything, please. And Archer moves in closer too, kind of stood right beside Luna. And Griff's light is enough that they can now get a look at this kind of unfortunate soul slumped over the desk. And they both lean in to see the skeletal remains, frozen over and still. And all the bodies are like this. They're all skeletal remains. What the hell happened here? Let's keep moving. Where are we headed? This is a research vessel. I want to know what they were out here researching. So let's say there's two other exits out of the control room. What are they? So 42, we've got corridor, or 56, some stairs. Okay, let's take the corridor and see where that leads. I don't fancy Griff's chances of getting up the stairs. So they cross the room and they take care not to kind of disturb anything. And without power, there's not much to be gleaned from the equipment here, I don't think. And Archer wants to get to the research department because he knows that's where he'll most likely find answers about, why there is a Griffin Institute ship stationed all the way out here and what it was looking for and maybe even what happened to it. So I think Archer here is driven by a bit more urgency. So we're going to carry on with our expedition, but we're going to move quicker and we're going to move plus edge. Okay, strong hit. So we reach a waypoint. We envision our location and mark progress. So let's do that real quick. So explore the Griffin Institute Derelict, 9 out of 10. So very nearly up to full progress on that. And I think this is where, because this is what we're looking for, this is where we find the research department. So let's roll up more details on what we find inside. Okay. 66 is library or records. I think I'd like to add to that. I don't want this just to be one thing because I think this is the main part of the ship and research is its main purpose. So I think there would be a bit extra going on here. So let's roll that up. Okay, isolation or containment. And I think I'd like to add a feature too. Let's add a unique feature. 61. 61 is inscrutable artifact. So, okay, I can see where this is going now. I think I'll also, just to give more flavour, I'm going to roll a feature from the Ruined theme oracle as well. 19 is focal point or nexus of the destruction. Okay, so, they follow the corridor, and it's maybe wider. It's kind of more open than the other corridors they've been through. And I think that this is perhaps because it is a high traffic area. You can walk kind of 3 or 4 people side by side down this corridor. And I think, yeah, on one wall, it's the viewing windows that we saw on the side of the ship there. That's where they stood. One wall of the corridor is just all glass, and the view of the grave world down below is pretty spectacular once you kind of wipe away the ice to get a good look. The planet below is barren. Even to Luna, who's from Rust, this looks pretty bleak. Archer kind of grabs her by the sleeve and says, "Let's go." She takes one last look and follows behind Archer and Griff. And up ahead, there's this door marked Central Institute Lab. And Archer knows this is it. He uses the manual override again, and the door opens. It lets out this audible groan as this stale, icy air escapes as it opens. And Griff's light does enough to let them kind of see what's what. The room is very large, and it's unlike the other rooms in that it's kind of very open, and it's kind of like very large and kind of cavernous, and there's a staircase on either side that leads up to kind of like a mezzanine style level. And the floor on which they stand is split into other large rooms, let's say 6 large rooms. And each one, I think, probably serves like a different purpose research-wise. And they're divided by glass screens. They're basically like glass cubicles, and there's 6 of them. There's 3 on each side of a kind of central walkway where you'd move through this lab. And at the end of the walkway is a large blackboard, like one of those huge ones you see in college movies where the professor has got huge, big, complicated proofs on the back. One of those that kind of slides up and down, kind of rolls around, so you can kind of get like a lot of information on it. There's desks scattered around. The mezzanine above seems to be like an archive. I think there's lots of shelving and racking where there's kind of information being held that's probably a mix of digital and also kind of analog information. But it's like the rest of the ship. It's dark and it's dead in here. And I think each of these rooms, each of these little glass kind of cubicles has at least 2 or 3 pairs of skeletal remains in. And they're all kind of slumped over desks or crumpled onto chairs. And as Archer and Luna move slowly down the central walkway, Archer kind of suddenly stops and puts his hand out to stop Luna. And he kind of points to the room at the end of the row of rooms. And on the right-hand side, let's say this one wasn't glass. They're not all glass. There's just one. And I think that one is kind of heavy metal. And it's kind of been reinforced with these kind of panels of plating and bars. And for the first time in this whole expedition, there's a sound. And that sound is a low, barely discernible hum. Kind of barely even there at all. And it seems to be coming from that room at the end, which seems to be some kind of containment unit. So let's do a couple of things first. Firstly, let's finish this expedition. We're at 9 progress. We've found the area we're looking for, and when we do that, we roll against our progress, which is 9. So this is fairly safe. Let's roll against that now. Okay, that's a strong hit. So we reach our destination and complete our survey. Mark progress on your discoveries track. So we do that once because it was just troublesome. But we also mark an additional tick thanks to our Explorer asset. So we've started our 3rd box going there, and we have some XP to spend. So that's cool. But the next thing I'm going to do is gather information because I want to know what happened here. Archer is on this ship. It's been out here for probably decades, maybe even like much longer than that. And the beacon has been sent, but no one's answered. And like no one also has come and picked the ship clean. It's just completely untouched. And this is a baffling kind of mystery to Archer. And he just wants to get to the bottom of it, in addition to kind of resupplying to kind of help him on his way. So what we're going to do is we're going to use our scavenger asset here as well. So this lets us add +1 to the roll when we're scavenging a wreck and trying to gather information. So rolling plus wits with an additional +1. Okay, strong hit. So we discover something helpful and specific, and we take +2 momentum and additional +1 momentum from the scavenger asset. So that pops our momentum right up to 6. Perfect. That's much healthier. So all we have to do now is figure out what on earth we are going to find out about the fate of the vessel that we are standing on. And I think I know already. Archer moves slowly down the central walkway to the blackboard on the wall. And the containment unit to his right hums this kind of low resonance. And Griff rumbles alongside him on the floor, his light kind of illuminating the board. And the markings made by whoever did it are still legible after all these years that the ship's been out here. The writing is kind of hard to decipher. Obviously, these are academics. They've got notoriously bad handwriting, so just like real life. But I think the main thing on the board is a drawing. And that's what stops Archer in his tracks. Because it's an illustration of a set of symmetrical, curved pillars that are rising out of the floor, starting straight before bending inwards to meet. Each pillar at the base is wider and gets thinner towards the top. And at the peak, they cross over. Archer has seen this shape before. He saw it the last time he saw Professor Darwin alive. This is an illustration of an iron gate. And those are the mysterious relics that are left by a long-dead civilization, said to be portals that allow kind of near instantaneous transport anywhere in the galaxy. If you remember from Session 0, our ancestors used these iron gates to flee the homeworld during the Exodus. And they're rumoured to be kind of dotted around various locations in the Forge. And Archer and Professor Darwin found one. Then Professor Darwin disappeared through it and everything changed. Now here Archer is, looking at it. It's just this crude sketch, but it brings it all back to him. Archer reaches up and grabs the handle on the board and pulls it down to see what else is written on it. And as the next sheet of blackboard rolls round, there's another sketch. This time, it's a symbol. It's a circle with a smaller circle inside, with a cross cutting through, and 2 smaller circles below. Luna comes up beside Archer, looking at the board, says, "What is it?" Archer is deep in thought. He turns towards the humming containment unit. Its kind of heavy lead, kind of metal exterior has been reinforced kind of more than once, multiple times, kind of patchwork metal all over it. Archer reaches out to pull aside the viewing hatch. He kind of summons Griff closer to maybe get some light in there, but as he pulls the hatch across, he doesn't need light to see inside, because whatever's in there is generating its own illumination, its own purple, blue glow, pulsing slowly. Luna pushes her head alongside Archer's to see inside. And inside the containment unit is completely featureless, except for a small plinth. And on that plinth sits a chunk of black, glass-like metal, about 2 meters long. It's curved, wider at the base, growing thinner as it rises up. This is a segment of an iron gate, and it has seemingly been removed and placed here for further study. What is it? Luna asks again. That, Archer says, is trouble. Thank you a million times. Thank you for watching once again. Please like this video, subscribe if you have not done so already, and ring the little bell to be first to find out what on earth will happen next week. Until then, it's farewell and safe passage.